Let's get started. Just a brief intro. Civil society organizations around the world are committed to the idea and principles of social and gender justice. Every person should have equal opportunities and the freedom to live the life they want, regardless of their gender and social background. We know from history that even in an analog world, reality doesn't often match these ideas. So today, we are taking a look at the question of cyber colonialism in Africa. What are the problems and what might solutions look like? Today, we are pleased to have three panelists with us, and we're going to take a few moments now to hear from them. Jean-Louis is coming to us from Dakar. Jean-Louis, could you unmute yourself, turn on your camera, and just give a really brief introduction. You'll have a minute to share, you'll have more time to share about what it is that you do and the statement that you'd like to make in a moment. But first, just a brief introduction of who you are and what it is that you do.
Hello, everyone.
There you are.
I'm very happy to be with you. I am from Senegal, from Dakar. I am a lawyer, I am a professor, I'm a researcher at the Virtual University of Senegal, which is the 6th public university here in Senegal. And we are involved in process like digital things, and also we are doing very basic things, but we are the one who are engaged in Senegal with others in this debate around the topic of digital matters. I'm very happy to be there, and I thank ICS Center, Barbara and Carl for having me today with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean-Louis. We'll come right back to you in a moment, but welcome. It's great to have you with us. Second, Karen Guevara is speaking to us from Washington, D.C. Karen, can you turn on your video, please? You can unmute yourself and give us hello and give us just a brief introduction to who you are and what you do.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the International Civil Societies that are putting this together. My name is Karen Guevara. I am the founder and president of Equanimity Foundation. Equanimity Foundation focuses on inclusive, sustainable, and transformative global development. A little bit about my background. I started my career in the nonprofit sector in microfinance, and thereafter I transitioned to working at the United Nations. I've worked for the Department of State, also the Pentagon, and several both for-profit and nonprofit organizations. And so which have allowed me to travel overseas quite a bit and mostly throughout Africa. So I'm excited to be here and have this discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And our third panelist is Sally Nduta. She is currently in Nairobi. Sally, could you turn on your camera? Hello, and give us a brief introduction to yourself too, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Sally Nduta. I work at United Disabled Persons of Kenya, commonly known by its abbreviation, UDPK. I work as a programs manager. I'm a disability rights advocate, working to ensure that persons with disabilities are meaningfully engaged in development, in politics, and in all spheres of life. So we'll engage later. I'll tell you more about what we do, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Great. So we'll take a few minutes now for each of the panelists to talk a little bit more about what they do and share their sort of opening statements in this topic of whether Africa is falling prey to cyber colonialism. So we'll go back and start with Jean-Louis. Please take around 5 to 6 minutes and share with us what you'd like.
Thank you, Barbara. I was saying that I'm very pleased to be among you today because what I'm invited here is maybe due to my column I have published in Jeune Afrique. Jeune Afrique is one of the most popular magazine in Africa. And I had published there a column on cyber colonialism. I know that the word colonialism can wake a lot of souvenir in the very French of this word, a lot of souvenir and sometimes bad souvenir. And it was more like in a provocative way that I have chosen this term of colonialism and cyber colonialism. What is the problem here we are facing in Africa? I'm very happy Nduta is here because Kenya is one of these African countries that can really integrate very well these technologies, etc. And Kenya is really an example of how African and young African can use these technologies and use it in a very useful way, in a very useful manner. So the problem is not how to appropriate this technology. The problem is how we can, in Africa, not only be consumers and also be able to be producers. And the big debate is to produce contents in the internet, contents that can serve the daily life of Africa. The other issue is in this order. The other issue is if we are not aware of the importance of the data issue, maybe we will not be able to move from consumers to producers. And what I have write in this column in Jeune-Afrique it was more of a wake-up call than a denunciation of a situation. What I see around me is young people not being aware of the importance of data. They are transferring their data to the international big tech firms without any reflection, thinking of the importance of what they are doing. This column was written in a context of COVID-19, where the government was thinking about putting a tool, an app, like many apps we have in Africa to tackle the problem of COVID-19, in having this tool, this app, being able to say who had the disease or who in your whereabouts, if you have people, we already have the disease. In France, they have an app like that did not work very well. And at some time in Senegal, we are thinking about setting up this kind of app, but we have this opposition of the young boys and girls utilizing Twitter, Facebook, and also who were just fearing the government use the data for other purposes. And the question was, why do you agree when it is Facebook, Google, and so to give your data without any kind of reflection? You always agree to give your data to Facebook, to Google, and so. But when it comes to the state, there is always reflection, and there is always people saying, I can't, I don't, because it's not safe, etc. And that's the context in which the reflections comes to me. And in a center we have in Paris, which is the international, the Center for Digital Human Rights, we have this reflection in Africa, how we are going to face, how we are going to do to face the issue of data and sovereignty, because African country on this issue need to to face it in a different way, to put it in a different way. I will, if you allow, I will come back on it on my second term. Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, we will definitely come back to this. There's more to be said. Thank you so much. Karen, would you, there you are, lovely. Would you take about 5 to 6 minutes and also share with us your statement about what it is that you're doing?
Wonderful, will do. I prepared a few statements for today, and again, I'm really thankful to the International Civil Society Center for hosting this very important discussion. My journey as a practitioner of development and security, and now as the founder of a nonprofit organization, is intrinsically linked to my identity as a Salvadorian American. I was born in El Salvador and grew up seeing entire communities being decimated by civil war. Living through that conflict, I learned early on about the power and resilience of communities who survive, overcome conflict, and manage to build back up. It gave me a stubborn belief in the need to empower communities to be in charge of actionable change. These learnings have transferred to our organizational ethos at EQF. Local communities are stakeholders on our activities on the ground. And our actions are always data-driven and data-informed. We are currently developing a capacity building project in Afghanistan through our program, Her Voice in Peace Building. And the curriculum development for the project was informed by the data collected from Afghan women who stood to benefit from the final program. Or take, for example, our humanitarian assistance in El Salvador, where we use data to identify the most vulnerable populations in need for trauma-informed care and food security. Conducting research and developing programs for Global South countries is characterized by a wide range of ethical complexities, especially for organizations from the global north that are entering these regions with their own set of privileges and advantages. In the past decade, we have collectively understood the power of big data and its ability to predict and dictate human and organizational behavior. It has warranted some very critical conversations about the asymmetry of information that exists between international organizations and the communities and governments in the Global South. We often overlook the fact that data comes in many forms, not only in numerical and survey data that can be analyzed and processed, but also in images, videos collected from the field that capture the most intimate and vulnerable moments. Western organizations are known to use these visuals on their websites, their social media, marketing campaigns, and to make a case for their access to difficult subjects or challenging geographies, without providing a narrative that represents the subjects of the visuals as empowered, and instead almost always choosing the narrative of poor, desperate, deprived, and disadvantaged. But let's talk about research-centric numerical data. We must remember that data points are just stories of the lives of broken down into micropackets. We must treat these data points with the same respect, sensitivity, and accountability as we would treat personal accounts of individuals who are sharing some of the hardest and most personal details of their lives. Perhaps the most important determinant of the ethical use of data is accountability. Coming from an overt position of power, it is the duty of civil society organizations to set strict standards for data collection and reporting and be answerable to local authorities and communities for the quality and scope of data being collected. For the work we undertake at EQF, our primary focus is the well-being of the individuals we're trying to serve. And this support cannot be sustainable if we keep them out of the process. I'd like to highlight the system set up by a partner in Nigeria, dealing with refugee rights and women's rights. They have created a women's network and empowered the members to lead the activities of the network, providing requisite training to also collect and sort data for the projects being designed and executed. This ensures local ownership and supervision of data and prioritizes a grassroots approach to program goals. I'm very honored to be part of this event and to learn from my fellow panelists about the prevalent issues regarding data ethics in African countries. As a woman-led organization with most of our team members from the Global South countries, EQF is an ally in the cause to demonopolize the control of data and empower communities to be in charge of their data and their destiny. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. All right, Sally, would you also turn on your camera, unmute yourself, and share your statement with us?
Great. Thank you very much, Barbara. I would like to speak from the perspective of a segment of the population that is normally marginalized and is mostly at the periphery of, mainstream discussions. And I was asked to showcase a little bit about data, because as an organization, we also collect data. So just allow me to share my screen. So my presentation is about, I'm just showcasing how we collect data as an organization, and how we analyze, and what are some of our experiences. And then I'll be happy to, engage a little bit later on a few of the issues that my fellow panelists have raised. So I will start by giving you a very briefly about who we are as UDPK. We're a federation of organizations of persons with disabilities in Kenya. We are a civil society organization, a membership organization representing various categories of persons with disabilities. Currently, we have about 100 member organizations in our database. And it is important at this point to briefly define organizations of persons with disabilities, because not so many people understand who they are. So these are organizations governed and managed by persons with disabilities themselves. They are a platform for representation and to give a voice to persons with disabilities to articulate their issues and interests. A key mandate is to advance and advocate the rights of persons with disabilities. So they are formed around a slogan that many of you may have heard or maybe not. It's known as "Nothing about us without us." That means that persons with disabilities and their representative organizations want to be consulted, they want to be involved, in matters that concern their lives, but generally in a development discourse. So what do? We lobby and advocate to mainstream disability in legislation, in programs, in planning. We do a lot of disability awareness to address barriers. Persons with disabilities in the world today face a lot of barriers. Barriers to accessing information, accessing, even services. Physical access is a huge problem, especially in many of our African countries. So part of what we do is creating awareness to remove barriers, and we work a lot with governments and other development agencies to create awareness so that they know how to remove barriers. And also importantly is to also remove the stigma that is associated with disability, which is also very strong, especially in African countries. We also monitor implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, SDGs, and other international treaties, our national laws and policies. Relevant to our topic today, we are very keen on research, because as an advocacy organization, we are well aware that we need evidence to be able to inform our advocacy work. So we are really keen on advocacy. We do work in partnership with INGOs, with academic institutions to come up with research and proper information about relevant issues, especially those affecting persons with disabilities. As UDPK, umbrella organization, we are very keen on capacity building organizations of persons with disabilities, commonly known as OPDs, because we cannot be everywhere, and many of our members are spread across the country. So we do build their capacity, and for us in Kenya here, we have local governments, which have a mandate of planning and budgeting for service provision and programs. So we do not want persons with disabilities to be left out. We build their capacity so that they can monitor allocations by governments. Something that we are also very keen on is enhancing participation of persons with disabilities in governance and decision making, because we know that when you're not when you're not sitting in the decision making table, then you're in the menu. So why do we collect data as an organization? We do want to learn about our members. So we keep a lot of information about our membership organizations, what they are, where they are located, what are they doing, etc. So the other thing, as I said, is we gather evidence for advocacy. We also collect data and put information together for purposes of capacity building our members. So we'll put together, for example, toolkits. We develop a lot of articles and disseminate that through various media. For creating awareness both internally for our members and also for the general public. Whenever we want to gather baseline information about an issue, we also gather information through baseline surveys, situation analysis, etc. As a civil society organizations, we are donor funded, so we do put together information to report on our program activities. When we also want to demonstrate the perception of persons with disabilities on pertinent issues, we also collect data. For example, we have done Kenya's constitution turned 10 years old last year in August, so we did a perception survey on the how persons with disabilities felt in terms of how the constitution has changed their lives. And these are some of the images of tools, documents we have developed. The first one on my left, I think it's known as Bridging the Gap. You can see we were a number of partners there, and this study was examining disability and development in 4 African countries. So we were really happy to participate in that. The document on my right, known as Turning Intent into Action, is a toolkit that was developed for our members on how they can follow up on recommendations that the UN Convention Committee gave for Kenya in terms of how they would improve on implementation of the rights of people with disabilities. Same case, this is a guide that we developed for our members across the country. And the last one is a desk review on how persons with disabilities felt in terms of how the constitution is being developed. This one is a baseline survey that we had done particularly on women with disabilities in Kenya for a project we ran for about 3 years. Yeah, so in a nutshell, this is what we are, this is what we do, and those are the reasons why we collect data. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your screen and for the great presentation. Thanks to all 3 of you for your initial statements. We're going to shift gears slightly, and so I'm going to ask that all 3 panelists would turn on your cameras now. And you can keep yourself muted, that's fine, but we want to see all 3 of your faces together with mine. Wonderful. So we've got some time to discuss before we shift over and take a look at questions that might be coming in through the chat. I think everyone's been listening really carefully, which is wonderful. Please, if this sparks any questions, no question is stupid. I want you to know that. We want the questions, if you're asking it of yourself, believe me, others are asking it as well. So please put it into the chat. We'd love to see it there. The first question I have for you is actually, so in preparing for this debate with this topic of cyber colonialism in Africa, the elephant in the room, in a sense, is that it was quite difficult to find people interested in talking about the subject. And I wanted to raise that initially to say, why might that be? And give all 3 of you the opportunity to share your thoughts on that. But why might this be a topic that people either don't want to talk about or aren't sure if they want to talk about? Why might it be difficult to get people to talk about this subject?
May I begin?
Yeah, please do.
In my view, like colonialism itself, it's a very controversial issue, and it's very disturbing issue, and people don't want to remember what happened in the past, not in a way to find guilty persons. I think it is not the question now, But the question is not again. And not again in this digital era is how Africans themselves can wake up and see this new revolution as a new chance not to be left in the station by the train. And this is the point we are defending. In a theoretical point of view, my column and my position is to be, to put in this global context of post-colonial studies. I am in post-colonial studies, where you can see African saying now we have a word to say, we have a place to be, etc. And the place to be now is a digital place. We African need to say their word in this digital world. And I think if we put it this way, this topic would be less controversial. I recognize, I apologize that, I recognize that it is a little bit controversial. But if you take it another way, let me just in few seconds say something. All of us who are involved in studies, in digital studies, etc., or digital stuff, etc., we all may know this old paper published by Lawrence Lessig on Cody's law, when he was showing us that the technical norms are superior to the ethicals and legal norms. And what we are facing in Africa, we are facing it everywhere in the world, but maybe more in Africa than elsewhere, because in Africa we have this issue of illiteracy that increasing all the situation. In all the big cities in Africa, you will see people with smartphones, but do they know what are the real challenges behind this smartphone? And that's why I was saying it is more about a wake-up call than making someone guilty of something. I'm not here to say you are guilty, you are the nice guys, etc. This is not my point. My point is how in Africa we can take advantage of this situation and say to all, we have this forced revolution, we have our place in this revolution. We have to gain our place in this revolution, and how to gain our place is to fight to determine the content. And I'm very happy to see, because yesterday I had visited the website of Karen, I'm very happy to see that Karen is in this same fight, because she's very involved in Africa, empowering women, etc. And this is what we are fighting for. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Karen, Sally, other thoughts on why this? Jean-Louise, you can leave your camera on so that the four of us stay here visible. It's okay if you're not looking at the camera the whole time, but anyway, Sally and Karen, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks, Barb. So I think colonialism just generates a lot of guilt and shame among community, not just those who have faced it, but also communities whose ancestors were involved. I think people are reluctant to talk about it because it actually makes them self-reflect and see how they may be actually benefiting from the power structures that that create that inequality. And earlier on with colonization, it was for raw materials, for resources, for people, but now today it's data, right? It's valuable and it has a lot of power. And so we need to really leverage that power for good. And I think when people don't do that, then, it really makes them question as to why they're, and when they're faced to question their practices, I think there's a reluctance to not want to confront the reality.
Yeah, Sally, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Sorry for talking over you. I want to agree with my fellow panelists. I mean, colonialism is something that people don't want to, talk about, or they want to wish away, or they don't want to deal with it. And then I think also in Africa, it's still seen as a Western problem. Like, for example, I saw the other day, I think the owners of Facebook and these other big companies being questioned. I think it was in the US. So it's still, I think this is still new concepts in Africa in terms of digitization and the powers and how to use data. Like, for example, even in Kenya, we just recently enacted our law around data protection, and not so many people know what the content is. It has taken a very long time for the government itself, and I'm just wondering whether you had tried even contacting government officials, because government plays a huge role, because they come up with laws and policies to regulate the whole question of data. So I'd say how people handle people's data and information is still a subject of discussion, and it's also a question of rights. How many of us as Africans know our rights in terms of how our data needs to be handled? So for me, there's a gap there in terms of awareness and how many people know their rights in terms of how corporations, government, manage and share our information. So I'd share the example of Kenya, and many of us, sometimes you get, text messages from whichever company, and you wonder, how did these people get my number, for example? So yeah, so my question to you is, did you try to contact government officials to participate in this debate and share with us their side of the story? Thank you.
Yeah, these are important questions. I actually can't answer that about the government. Someone from ICS can put that into the chat if that was something. I think the focus has been on civil society organizations and other NGOs to see if someone would be interested in the topic. But I appreciate what you've all said, that colonialism itself is a very tricky word and brings a lot of baggage with it on many sides. And so perhaps framing it with different language is also helpful, so that it's not this feeling of blame or shame, but also looking for solutions and talking about it that way. I want to get back to a concept of sovereignty that Jean-Louis talked about, because I think sometimes when we think sovereignty, we think about national sovereignty and the role of governments in that. And I'd like for you to talk just a little bit about when you mean sovereignty of data, is that talking about on a national level? Is that on a personal level? Can you talk a little more about that? You can.
Thank you, Barbara. I think it's more at a not at a national level, because we have in Africa sometimes very small countries, and no one of these countries can face the big firm like Google, etc. And we need to go together to tackle this problem of data, and that's why, if we put it another way, if you take the states, the state as we know it generally, the state is organized around this principle of separation of powers. But if you see the big firms, the big tech firms, they are not organized in separation of power. All the powers are in the hand of one big firm. If you take Google, you have all the powers, the judicial, the legal, etc., executive power. They are all in one hand. And it is a very new shape, a very new organization, and facing the state. And the states, they don't have enough power, mainly in Africa, they don't have enough power to face this new configuration of international relations. That's why, for me, The answer is not from a state to another, but the answer is like European Union did with the GDPR. The answer is how African countries can unite, maybe within organizations like African Union, to have one response to this issue of sovereignty. Because we can be, Senegal itself cannot be sovereign when Senegal is facing Google and Facebook. There is an asymmetrical relation here, very strong, and it is a problem. That's why for me the solution is in big organizations like African Union to fight it. But in the internal, in the domestic regulation, one have to promote also tools like National Commission of Protection of Data. Not all the African countries have this kind of organization to protect and promote data, and to protect and promote privacy. That's what Nduta was talking about. It is also about privacy. It is an education to privacy. And I think in the world we are living in, it is important in African country to promote also awareness about privacy. It is very important that information we are transferring, we are giving, are very important information. And universities like Virtual University of Senegal are participating in this fight to promote privacy, to promote also awareness around all these issues linked to digital issues. So sovereignty is now has changed. It is not the sovereignty we knew before, how Rousseau and etc. has theorized it. Sovereignty is a very new concept, because sovereignty is facing the power of these big international tech firms. Barbara.
Thank you so much for that. Sally, I'm curious on this topic, like from the perspective of a local NGO, how do you see the role of the local NGO in terms of sovereignty of information?
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, and also as a local organization, that is an organization of persons with disabilities that has to fight for its space, because many times organizations of persons with disabilities are not recognized, even by other NGOs, so that others want to speak on behalf of persons with disabilities. So for us, sovereignty would be about even the partnerships that we engage in. For example, the research studies that I just shared with you. How do you structure the agreement, and how do you give us the roles? And especially from even donors themselves, what roles do you want us to play? Do you want us to publish that? Do you want us to own the data which is being collected in our own country? And these are real issues. There are times when we've had to, have very long negotiations or disagree in terms of how this data will be published. And there are situations whereby we have refused to, enter into partnerships because from how partnerships are structured, it looks like it's not going to benefit us as an organizations of persons with disabilities. So for me and for us as UDPK, it's about the partnerships that we are engaging in and a publication of data. What rights do we have on that? And also, yeah, just the power play between, the Global North donors and also the Global South, and also we also have INGOs in between. This is a debate we've had in Kenya, and it can be a sore topic, because also many INGOs feel like sometimes national organizations do not want to work with them, or they feel like INGOs are taking their roles. So for us, sovereignty is, are you giving local organizations power, and do you see them as equal partners, in research? So for us, those are the key issues. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. And actually, Karen, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well, coming from an international foundation that works with multiple different countries. What are your thoughts on sovereignty?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I don't think of it as data sovereignty. Instead, I think of it as data ethics and accountability. I think sovereignty just sort of makes it, you know, it's a might type of concept, whereas with accountability, we need to hold stakeholders who are in these organizations, like international organizations, accountable. So let me tell you a little example. When we partner with, earlier I mentioned one of our partners in Nigeria, we actually do spotlights where we are not intermediaries, where we are asking donations for donations so that we receive them and then we give it to them. I think that's just a middleman type of mentality. And instead what we do is we'll do like a spotlight on them. We will share information and actually encourage donors to go to their website to communicate with them directly. Because I think our role is to increase awareness rather than try to skim a little bit of money from the top, because that's not really helping build local capacity, right? Like we should be there to support them, not the other way around. And that's why I think accountability is so important, because it's not just, taking their stories for us to fundraise, but rather, taking their stories so that others can understand what it is that they need and how they can be helped, rather than us being, again, an intermediary in this situation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wonderful. I do want to give time to looking into some of the questions in the chat. There's only been a couple, a lot of nice statements and people looking for resources, and we love to see that. I do want to confirm that we did not reach out to any governments to be part of this, but it was all just to members of NGOs. So possibly that would have been a different response, but we won't know. But I do appreciate the thought from that, Sally. So we had a question from Mr. Bakum about how to protect, this is primarily for Jean-Louis, but I am happy for anyone who has thoughts on this to answer. And that is how to protect African startups and ensure fair competition, and how African governments should take a role in, what the stand of African governments should be on international agreements that regulate data flow. So I'm gonna, did you see those questions, Jean-Louis? So protecting African startups and how that might happen. Does that have to happen on the government level? Is it happening on more on the local level? Where can we expect to see that?
Thank you to Mo Bahum for his question. I think it is a more combined response than a single state response. I think that at the state level, the first thing is to have all these regulations that are set to have these regulations step as a response to this data issue. When I say regulations set, I mean all the laws, all the rules you need to be present in this new world. And it's not the case everywhere. You have this asymmetrical situation in African countries. A country like Senegal have a new law on startups, etc. You have this commission on data protection, etc. And it's not the case everywhere. And I think before responding, saying I'm present, you need to do what you have to do. And what you have to do is at a national level. And after the national level, you have also this African level with African Union. And African Union has a key role to play in this issue mainly in this period when African Union is talking about this free trade era within all Africa. And I think in this context of, again, forced revolution, African Union need to say, we were back in the previous revolution, but now we need to be in the first class train, not to lose this new revolution. And I have, for me, it's combined action from the state and from at African global level. But let me say just one word on this issue. It is also a matter of investment, a lot of investment in equipment in the internet. The cost of internet in Africa is linked to the cost of investment. The internet is cheaper in the countries who have a seafront, like Senegal, etc. If you go in the countries who have a seafront, internet is cheaper. And if you go deep in Africa without any seafront, internet is the price is different. Why? Because the cables come from Europe. They come from Europe, and incidentally, Europe have been present also in these different countries. We have the seafront, and the technology is not equally distributed in these different countries. And when you see the map, the internet map in Africa, internet map is also the seafront map. And I think that the African Union need to invest more to democratize the access to internet in the hinterland of African in Barbara.
Thank you. I think we have time for this last question that came from Laura. And to try to boil it down a little bit is that what's the public opinion and those of governments, and how maybe even how are those two at odds about American and Chinese big tech companies and their digitalization efforts for joint markets and partnership? What's the perspective of in Senegal, in Kenya, in different places, as you're aware of how public opinion is on those and how it might even differ from the government perspective? Sally, do you have a perspective on this?
I'm not very sure about this issue, but I think generally, I think being a consumer, many people will just care about how that is affecting their lives individually. So they're not caught up in the politics, you know, at the global level. But then it's an issue of is this accessible? Can I fulfill my needs as an individual? Let's say if I'm in business, if I'm a content developer, and I know in Kenya there are so many upcoming young people who are developing content. So for them, it would be an issue of cost. It would be an issue of access. So it's not a lot to do with you know, the politics that we know that is going on. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that perspective. Karen, do you have anything that you'd like to add on that topic of the public perception and how that's perceived?
You know, I think it's a really interesting question, and one that's difficult to answer, because a lot of these things are allowed to happen because of consumers not holding big tech accountable, right? And also governments not holding them accountable. And I think it's difficult, you know, in locations like throughout Africa where there isn't, you know, where there aren't strong laws, where there's the asymmetry of power to actually try to combat these giants. And so, you know, it's very difficult. And I think I don't have much more to add than John Lee's. He did a great job explaining how he sees it. And I think it's important to actually tie back to that, because I think the solutions that are developed need to be African-led. It can't be us telling them what they should be doing. It should be their perspectives. It should be their prerogative, and it should be, you know, them leading the charge. So I think, you know, I will reflect back to my colleagues, because I think it's you know, it's their data and their destiny that they should be in charge of.
May I add something, yes. Barbara?
Yes,
I
please
think, and I know John Louis talked about this, and I also made reference to this earlier. I think in Africa right now, we need a lot of awareness, especially in terms of privacy and what that means. The debates that you're having in the Western world are very important, because you'll find a lot of where the question of, you know, these issues around sovereignty and are still alien. And you by now, I think many of us know that, for example, mobile technology is very, you know, now at home. It's very relevant. Very many people are accessing the internet, even on their mobile phones. And internet is relatively cheaper, like John Louis has explained, in countries where you find they have a coastal line. So, and many people are getting a lot of information through the internet. Especially now with the COVID situation, many institutions are also, you know, teaching through online. So for me, I think the next big step, and I'll also speak as a Kenyan, we have quite a number of laws. Like I just shared, we have a data protection law that just came in. But then the issue is always enforcing the law. How do we ensure that we enforce the law and that all relevant parties, even the international companies, are playing by the laws and they are following what is laid down? And then we ensure that the public is aware and they can demand for their rights to, one, information, to privacy, and to develop content that tells the story of me as a Kenyan. I can be able to tell my story. I can be able to tell my story as an African, and that is respected and is seen as, you know, the true reflection of who I am as an African, as a Kenyan. And that is also, and that I have, you know, rights to, you know, own that data. So that's what I'd say as the next big step. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad that you shared what you just did, because these are excellent words to end our discussion with. And what I love is I had written down that exact thing, thinking about what you had said and what Jean-Louis had said at the beginning, that there are a lot of young people in Africa who would never let the government have access to the data that they're happy to give Facebook or Google or whatever other things that they hold on their smartphones. And so building awareness is key. Thank you so much to the three of you for being with us. Thank you to Karen and to Sally and Jean-Louis. Really appreciate you and your perspectives. I think now we've really gotten warmed up when we could talk about this for another hour. Isn't it always that way? But I hope that for those of you who've joined us today, and thank you also for joining us, I hope that this is a topic that you will approach with people that you come into contact with in the tech world, people working in NGOs, whatever it is, that maybe the concept of colonialism isn't the step forward, but at the same time to be aware of these issues of privacy and how as a global community we can look at these and have ethics, accountability, and awareness built into it.